All right, welcome to the session with the Kansas City Public Library and BikeWalkKC, where we are going to learn how to maintain our ride today. My name is Kim Guile, and I am the Community Specialist Leader here at the Kansas City Public Library. And I'm joined by Laura Steele and Mark Horn from BikeWalkKC, and they are going to take off our curriculum today that you'll see featured on the screen there. So Laura and Mark, you are ready to go.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim. So as she mentioned, we are from BikeWalkKC. I'm going to allow Mark to introduce himself, but as mentioned, I'm Laura Steele. I'm the Director of Education at BikeWalkKC. We really appreciate the opportunity through the Kansas City Public Library to reach out to patrons and offer this education so that you guys can keep your bikes running longer and more smoothly. As mentioned, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. Do feel free, if you want to unmute and ask a question. But I will also kind of be taking some top tips from Mark and putting them in the chat so you guys can see that. And then as Kim mentioned, it'll be on YouTube so you guys can watch it again. But I'm now going to turn it over to Mark, and he's going to introduce himself and kind of give you guys the rundown of what we're doing today.
All right, welcome everybody. My name is Mark Horn. I'm an educator here at BikeWalkKC. I'm also a mechanic. I have a number of years in the bicycle industry working at retail shops, and I maintain all of the bikes here at BikeWalkKC. My goal for this is to give you some education so that you can feel confident to tackle some of your own repairs on your bicycles at home, or have the knowledge to go into a bike shop and speak with a mechanic there and feel a little more comfortable about having that dialogue. So it's going to be kind of a maintain your ride, we call it, and it's fairly basic stuff, but we'll get into some slightly advanced stuff at the end, and I'll try to make myself available to answer any specific questions you may have towards the end, but I can typically get through this program in about an hour, maybe a little bit over an hour, and then I'll try to save some time there to tackle any specific questions you may have about your bikes or issues you may be having. I've got a couple cameras working here, so I've got this camera that I can show you this demonstration tool we have here, and then I'll step into it to show you some things close into the camera. Like this, and then I have another camera that shows some other kind of demonstration tools. So I'll be switching between there. I hope you're not motion sick, so I may have to adjust the camera while I'm doing that. But all right, let's get started. Let's talk about the introduction that put it on me, Laura.
I pinned you.
No, I still see you.
It may be your view. Kim, can you pin for everyone?
You are featured, Mark. So go ahead.
I am featured. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I can't see what I am doing, so I will just see if I can pin my own self. There we go. Okay, so as long as you guys see me, then we'll proceed. Let's talk about bicycles and how to fix things on bicycles. Before we ever get started, if you're going to do any repairs on your bicycle and you're going to use any tools, I want you to know that every fastener on a bicycle is going to be a metric fastener. So if you're going to grab any tools to do any work, please do not grab any standard tools, any inch-based tools. Grab metric. And I'm going to show you a few of the specific ones you may want to have. If you have a bicycle that has any like the axles are bolt-on axles, front or rear, those are typically a 15 millimeter bolt or nut. So I use a combination wrench here, a 15 millimeter combination wrench to let me take axle nuts on or off. If you're dealing with pedals, to take pedals on and off, pedals are also 15 millimeter. But there is a specific tool that we use to take pedals on and off. It's a pedal wrench. It's a 15 millimeter opening, but it is super skinny to fit between the crank arm and the pedal body. So if you're trying to take pedals off, I would doubt that you'd be able to fit that between there, or even an adjustable wrench. You may need a specific pedal wrench to do that. We've got a multi-tool. This is just a typical basic multi-tool you would use that has 3 hex wrenches on it, the standard sizes 4, 5, and 6. And then it has a Phillips and a flathead screwdriver on it. This should be in your little kit that you would take around with you, or you just have your standard hex wrenches 4, 5, and 6. These are the most common that you'll find on a bicycle. Another bicycle specific tool that you should have and know how to use, and I will show you how to use that, is a tire lever. Back when I was a kid, we just used a flathead screwdriver to take tires on and off. And that was a bad idea because you would, the flat tip screwdriver was sharp enough to puncture a tube. So we use tire levers to do that now. So those are the tools, the basic kind of tools, and some bike specific tools you may want to have and know how to use. When we're dealing with bicycle maintenance, there's a mnemonic we use here at Bike Walk to teach people how to check their bicycle to make sure that it's safe. It's called the ABC Quick Check, 5 parts, the ABC Quick Check. It's for air, brakes, chain, quick release, and then to check yourself or check your helmet or whatnot. And I'm going to follow that same mnemonic today to go in depth into each of those parts on the bicycle. So we're going to start with A for air, talk about everything to do with tires, tubes, how to fix a flat, how to change a tire, change a tube. First thing we need to talk about is if you are going to be changing tubes or messing with your tires, you need to understand all the information that you can get off of that tire, so you know what size the tire is, what size tube you would need, what style tube you would need. So printed or stamped on every bicycle tire should be several pieces of information. You should have the size of the tire, and you should have tire pressure information as well. So on this tire, if you can see this, one of the pieces of information you want here is the size. This is a 26-inch diameter tire. So 26, the X is the separator between the diameter and the width of the tire. So 26 by 1.5. This tire is 26 inches in diameter, and it's 1.5 inches in width. So when you're looking for a tube, you would need to find a tube that would fit that diameter and that width. The other thing you need to know about tubes specific is the valve stem type. There are 2 different types of valve stems that you'll deal with out there on bicycles. You have this old style that's the same exact thing as it's on your car or your truck. This is called Schrader. The little pin is inside. It's protected by the outer metal shell. To release air pressure, you push down on that little pin, lets the air come out. Or you have this style that's called Presta. Presta is skinnier for narrower rims, and it has a pin that is exposed. Sorry, I gotta get my fat fingers out of the way. This pin is exposed and has a protective little nut on it that when you screw that nut in, the pin cannot be depressed. So if you're going to inflate or deflate, you need to unscrew this little nut to allow that pin to open in and out. The internals of these valve stems are basically the same. It's just this one's exposed and skinnier, and this one is protected and a little thicker. But the hole in your rim will determine what valve stem you need. So if you're looking for a tube, you need to know diameter, width, valve stem type. And then you can go into a bike shop or wherever you want to get a tube, and you can look for a tube and match up with those dimensions. This is a 26-inch tube, but it is between 1.9 and 2.125 in thickness. So this is too thick. This is a 26, 1 to 1.25. This is too narrow. This tube, neither of these tubes will work in this tire, but I'm just using them as a demonstration. But you see the difference in the valve stem. This is a Presta, and it says it right on the tube box, and this is a Schrader. So when you're looking for tubes, you need to know that information. let's talk about fixing a flat and how to properly take a tire off of a rim. If you have a flat tire, notice first of all, and this is by design, my tire is mounted on my rim with this label over the top of my valve stem. And that's done not just because I like things to be in a set order, but it gives me a reference point to orient the tube and the tire. If I ever take this tire off, I know where that tube lined up inside the tire. So if I have a puncture, I can find the hole in the tube, and then I can find where that puncture would have happened in the tire because I can orient the tube and the tire together. So if you're going to take this tire off, first thing you want to do before you ever attack trying to get it off is I want you to take the tire and I want you to pinch both sides of the bead together, and you're breaking that bead off of the rim. If it's kind of stuck on there, you know, that rubber might get a little sticky and stick to that the metal of the rim. You're going to break that loose. The other thing you're doing is you're trying to get the tire, the hard edge of the tire, to kind of fall into the valley of the rim, drop down into that center kind of valley down there. So if you can pinch that together and break it all loose, that'll help you get that tire off of there. Bob, could I ask you to turn your microphone off while we're doing this? And if we got a question, we can pop that back on there. All right, so you've got your bead broken loose. You feel your tire is kind of loose here on the rim. You're going to take your tire lever. We're going to start with one tire lever, two sides to a tire lever. You have this scoop end that I would call it here, and then you have this hook end on the tire lever. You're going to start with the scoop end. You're going to, hope you can see this, you're going to stick this scoop end underneath the edge of the tire and kind of catch it. Promise it'll work. Then you're going to pry it out and hook the hook on the spoke like that. Let's just line that up so it's like that, okay? What you've done is you've created a gap on the tire on either side of that tire lever. And that allows you to take your second tire lever and insert it in that gap. And you can either push away from you or pull towards you. It's your choice. Either way works, but you want to stick your tire lever in this gap. And well, I'm just going to pry it away, and you're prying the tire off of the rim all the way around. And if you drop the tire lever, that'll happen. Now I've got the tire off of the rim just on one side, okay? The tire is still on this side, but it's off here. And it allows me to reach in and pull the tube out. This is kind of key. I leave the tire on one side. There's no reason to pull the tire completely off at this point. I can just kind of pry that valve stem out, and here I have the tube, and here's the tire still on the wheel. And that label is right there where that valve stem hole is. Okay, you may want to like figure out why you have a flat. You may want to put some air in this tube, find wherever the hole is. Like I said, you can orient that valve stem with that label. Let's say the hole is right here, then I know that the hole in the tire is right here. And that lets me search a little closer, feel inside there, be careful. It might be sharp, it might poke you, but find whatever poked through and remove it. You don't want to put a brand new tube in to a tire that has something sticking through it. Let's assume that we found whatever the puncture was and we've remedied it and it's good. And this tire is now safe to install a new tube. We're going to grab a new tube out of a box. When you grab a tube out of a box, it will not look like this. It will be kind of vacuum packed, and you may need to put a little bit of air in it. That is helpful. So put just a little bit of air, give the tube a little bit of body that you can work with it. You're going to start at the valve stem, holding the wheel with the exposed part of the tire here. I'm going to peel it backwards to expose my valve hole. I'm going to stick that valve down into that hole, and then I pry that tire back over the top of the tube. And then now I kind of tuck that tube into the tire all the way around. And with that little bit of air in that tube, the tube will want to just kind of hide inside the tire. Okay, tube is now inside the tire. Now I need to set the tire back on the rim. Again, starting at the valve, I will, using just my hands, working from both sides around the wheel, poke that tire back onto the rim until I get generally to the opposite side, and I might need my tire lever again to help. So whatever's left over, you should be able to take the scoop end of your tire lever. You're going to stick it underneath the tire and catch the rim this time, and you're going to pry it on. And now that tire is on the rim and the tube is inside the tire, and you're good to go. Now you can put air in it. If you have a floor pump available to you, great. Floor pump's going to have a head that kind of looks like this. This head is universal. It'll work for both Schrader and Presta. It'll work for both of these. You don't have to do anything different. You just stick this on the valve stem, insert the valve stem in there, and lift that lever up. And now you can pump and put air into the tube. I don't know if you can hear that. And then when you're done, close the lever, pull the valve stem out, and you're done. But these type of modern pump heads work for both types of valve stems. Just open the lever to set it. I'm not going to pump this up. Oh, excuse me. Well, let's talk about pumping it up. That's the other part of information that is on this tire. We talked about size. The other part of piece of information here is the pressure range, the recommended pressure range for this tire, 45 to 85 PSI. Now, if I can give you any advice that you take home with you and remember, is that is a maximum and minimum. That is not pump it up to 85 PSI. That is, don't exceed 85 PSI. So you need to air this tire up to fit your personal preference and your, let's call it body type, for lack of a better word. If you are a larger, heavier person, you probably should get closer to that max, but don't be at 85. If you're a lighter person, smaller person, you can get away with something lower around that 45. I'm 185 pounds. I would put it somewhere around like 65 or 70 PSI on this tire. I would never get anywhere close to 85 PSI. You would make this tire so hard that it would be, first of all, uncomfortable, because you'd feel every bump. The other thing, that it's counterintuitive, but the harder you make this, the more pressure you put in the tire, the more apt you are to have flats. If the tire cannot conform to an obstruction, it'll be punctured. If the tire can wrap around that obstruction and flex around it, then you're less likely to get a puncture. So if you take anything away from this class, run your tires at lower pressure than you think you need to, and you will be surprised at how comfortable your ride is and how much fewer flats you will get. So somewhere in the middle, okay, somewhere in the middle of that range, and try it, see how that goes. All right, that is tires, tubes, changing of flat, valve stems. Does anybody have any questions about the letter A for air before we move on to the letter B? Okay, all right, cool. Well, we're going to start with the letter B for brakes. We're going to talk about brakes. Several different types of brake systems out there on bicycles. You have rim brake, which is pretty old school stuff, and now you have disc brake brake systems. And we're going to talk about rim brake, and I have a demonstration for how to adjust rim brakes. Disc brakes get kind of in depth and kind of tricky, so I don't have anything to demonstrate those, but we can talk about them if we need to. What I want you to do, first of all, checking your brakes, is to make sure that your brakes work, and to check your brake pads to make sure that they are still good and usable. And a couple things to check. If you have a rim brake bicycle, you'll have a pad that may look something like this. It's attached to the brake caliper with a post generally. And it could be like asymmetrical like this with a longer leg and a shorter leg, or it could be symmetrical like this. Either way, they're basically the same. They're made of the same material and they look similar. You have these cuts in them, and these cuts serve two different purposes. One of them is a wear indicator. It lets you know when the brake pad is worn down. When those little cuts disappear, then you've run out of kind of meat on the brake pad. The other thing is when you use your brakes and you wear them down, the material that gets kind of worn off the brake pad has to go somewhere, and it falls into those little cuts. So if you ever look at your brake pads and those cuts are filled with looks like black dust or black powder, that's the material from the brake pad. And it's okay to just kind of take something and just kind of knock that stuff out, right? Clear those cuts open again. So look for your brake pads, make sure that there's still life left on them, right? That that wear indicator is good. If you look at your brake pad and you see chunks of metal, any kind of debris kind of embedded in your brake surface, I would recommend that you find something, a little pick or a blade of some sort, and pick that stuff out of there. Get that metal out of your brake pad, because all you're doing is shoving that metal against your rim and kind of destroying your rim in the process. If you look at your brake pad and it looks like a wedge like this, and some of your wear indicators are missing and some are there, this needs to be replaced. This is also an indication that this brake pad was adjusted to wear what they call the toe. It was towed in, so it was adjusted to wear at the front first. This person was having a brake squealing or squeaking noise problem, so they adjusted their brake pads to remedy that. Well, it just wore their brake pad uneven. If you have a road bicycle or maybe a higher end bicycle that has what we call a cartridge style brake pad, you'll have this assembly that attaches to the brake caliper, and it's a metal kind of shoe, I guess you call it, and the brake pad just kind of slides into it. So you just replace this cartridge into that brake kind of shoe, and that's how you replace that. But the material's the same. It still has the cuts in it, right? Wear indicator, it's all still there. It's just a different way of installing it or replacing it. You just slide it out, slide a new one in. You don't have to adjust the brakes necessarily on the bicycle. Those are rim brake style brake pads. If you're talking about disc brakes, you do need to check to make sure that your disc brake pads are still good. This is an example of a disc brake pad. You'll have one pad for either side of a rotor, just like your car or your truck. The way to check to make sure that there's still life left in here is there is this spring in between. And if you can look closely enough, you'll see the metal of that spring is skinnier, I guess, or the brake pad material is thicker than the spring. And if you have pad material sticking past the spring, then you're good to go. If your spring is level with your brake pad, then that needs to be replaced. So that's how you check your brake pads. Let's talk about, here is an example of a road bicycle style brake caliper with those cartridge style brake pads that just slide in and out of that shoe, so you don't have to adjust them at all. But let's talk about adjusting brakes and brake pads to your rim. This is where I'm going to switch cameras, so please bear with me. Hopefully it's still set up. Hey, there we go. All right, so I have set up here a little demonstration tool that shows a cantilever, or I'm sorry, a V-style brake system with a rim brake setup, and I'm pulling on my brake lever and demonstrating that when you pull on your brakes, brake lever, your brake pad should touch each side of the rim at the same time. One brake pad should not touch the rim first and push the rim to one side or the other. And your brake pads should touch the rim even in parallel. Also, one brake pad should not be, twisted or touching the rim like I showed you, towed in so that, the front part of the brake pad touches before the back. So I'm going to show you how to make these adjustments. On a V-brake style brake system like this, you have a post brake pad, and that brake pad is attached generally with a 5mm. Here's a 5mm hex wrench, 5mm little nut over here. And in order to make this adjustment, what you need to do is you need to squeeze your brakes and hold those brake pads against the rim. This allows me to loosen that nut. And if I kind of feather my brakes a little bit, I can now adjust this one pad, and I can squeeze in the brake lever. I can off and on. I can get that brake pad kind of lined up, kind of up and down on the rim, make it kind of level, make it parallel with the rim. And then when I've got it set where I'm comfortable, I put my 5mm back in here and I snug that down. As I snug it down, you see that it's rotating. So beware of that. Once I get it kind of snug, I can kind of back it back. And just double check that. It's not set correctly. It's a little twisted. All right, so it's a little bit of finagling, a little bit of playing with it, but that's how you adjust your brake pads, is by loosening that nut, holding the brake lever with the pad against the rim, and that allows you to kind of manipulate it and get it level. On the side of your brake arms will be a, bear with me for just 1 second. Hope this doesn't make a bunch of noise. I'm going to show you what a brake arm looks like. Let's flip back to this other camera. Okay. This is a brake arm. This is a V-brake brake arm. Your pad would, that pad wouldn't work there, but sorry, should have had this set up. That pad would sit like that. That's what this looks like. Okay. On the outside, you have this screw right here, and this screw adjusts the spring tension for this arm. And if you screw that screw in, it'll make the spring tighter, so it'll spring back quicker. If you dial that screw out, it'll relax the spring so that it won't spring as fast. You want to adjust those screws on either side so that those brake arms will spring at the same rate and touch the rim at the same time. So just so that you understand what I'm going to do here. On the side of these arms are springs. Right here is where I'm putting my Phillips screwdriver. If I adjust that spring in, I'm going to turn it in a couple turns, you will see that that one arm now springs out more. And that's why this arm is touching the rim first, because the spring on this arm is now stronger. So to get those to meet at the same time, you just need to kind of play with those springs, adjust them so that when you pull the brake lever, you want them to touch at the exact same time, and you don't want that rim moving sideways at all. Like, I think you saw that I'm pushing that rim sideways because that one brake lever arm is touching first. So if you kind of doctor that a little bit, you can get them to meet, hit at the same time, and not push the rim sideways. And it's not always dialing it's not always adding more tension. Sometimes you need to remove tension from one of those brake arms. It will work the same as adding tension. Okay, that's that. Does anybody have any questions about brake pad adjustment and what those little screws do on the side of a brake arm.
Do you make any adjustments up on the handlebar?
Okay, so on the handlebar, here's a brake lever. It has this barrel adjuster up here on the handlebar. If you squeeze your brake lever and your lever comes all the way to the handlebar, feels real loose, kind of pulling, you can adjust this out, adding some cable tension, and you will tighten up your brake lever. Or if you pull your brake lever and it's like immediately touches the brakes and it's too tight, you can dial this in if there is adjustment left there. But that's all this really does. If you have small hands, which does happen with some of the kids' bikes we use, some brake levers will have a little adjustment screw setting in right here, which will allow you to position that brake lever closer to the handlebar at its starting position, is what this does. But if you adjust this in and push this brake lever closer to the handlebars for its starting positions, it's pulling cable. So you're going to have to adjust your cable at the brake arm to accommodate that. So that's what these adjustments are. This is a lever position, reach adjustment is what it is. And this is your barrel adjuster to add or remove cable tension and make your brakes faster or slower to react. If you don't have adjustment here left anymore, you're going to have to loosen the, I'll switch screens again. Right here is where the cable attaches to that brake arm. If you need to adjust, and I'll just do it, I'm going to release the cable here, and you can see that I can spread that open. But when I squeeze my brake lever, the pads don't even touch the rim anymore. So you can play with your cable adjustment here if you want to, but be careful messing with this too much, because every time I pinch down on this fastener, I'm stressing that cable, and you could eventually like start breaking some of the strands of the cable. So I would set this, once and make most of my adjustments with my barrel adjuster if I can. Is that good? Does that answer the question for you, Bob?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, cool. All right, that's brakes. I'm going to move on from brakes now to cover everything to do with the chain or the drivetrain. So let's talk about chains real quick before we get deep into anything else. Laura, can you throw up that slide that shows the exploded view of a chain? I want you to understand what a chain looks like. I think it's higher. Well, or does it exist? Oops. Maybe you don't have it.
I don't think I have it on this one. Sorry.
Okay. That's fine. Let's talk about, I can show it here, I think. Okay. Here's a little piece of chain. I want you to understand what a chain, what it's made of, so you understand how to maintain a chain properly. What you see on a chain, what most people see, and I'm sorry if I fidget with this, is the shiny outer plates. This outer plate that may have something stamped on it, may say Shimano, I think, maybe. That's the outer plate. You see the outer plate, and then you see the pin sticking through the outer plate. This thing in between that has like the cutout in it, that's the inner plate. Okay, so if I turn it sideways, you'll be able to see that. Outer plate, you can see the inner plate that just kind of connects the two outers. The pin goes through them, and then what goes around the pin is this piece right here. It's called the roller bearing. That thing kind of spins, all right? It doesn't look like it does, but that spins, and that's what makes contact with your cassette and with your chain rings. It's the roller bearing. The outer plates The inner plates really don't make, I mean, they do make contact, but not on a regular basis. When you pick a gear and this chain goes through your system, it's the roller bearings that are making contact with your drivetrain, not the inner or outer plates. So the only place on this chain that needs any lubrication is underneath the roller bearing. Allows it to spin, allows it to roll around on an inner flange of the inner plate. You do not need lubrication on the outside of the chain at all. These chains should be made of a material that is rust inhibited. These chains should not rust, so you don't need to coat them in oil to prevent them from rusting. And a lot of people get hung up on they need their chain to be coated so it doesn't rust. Let's not focus on that. Let's get the lubrication underneath the roller bearing so it's able to rotate. And when you hear squeaking, it's that roller bearing that is trying to move on a dry surface. So when you put lubrication on a chain, the way you want to do that, excuse me, is, let me move this thing forward so you can see what I'm doing. Okay. I really need a bunch of video people to do all this for me. Anyway, okay. So when I'm going to put oil or lube on my chain, and if you have a work stand, obviously it makes things more helpful. If you don't have a work stand, then flip your bicycle upside down if you can, or I hang it from the ceiling in my garage. Sometimes I like throw a strap over my garage door opener and I can hang my bicycle that way. But it really does help to be able to turn the pedals to be able to apply lube to your chain properly. Manufacturers recommend that you put a drop of lube on every roller bearing. So every link, a drop of lube. That's how they recommend that you oil a chain. I don't have time for that. Nobody has time for that. There's 112 links on this chain. I can't count that high and remember where I started. So what I do is I take my bottle of lube, I open up the cap, and I just stick that nozzle on my chain and I rotate my chain and I just drip lube on every roller bearing. That's what you're hearing, the tip kind of hitting each roller bearing. And I just put lube on every link. Okay. Next thing I want to do is I want to shift the gears, run that chain through all the gears with that new lubrication kind of finding its way down in between the roller bearing and the little flange that it rides on. By shifting the gears, you are flexing the chain sideways a little bit, just ever so slightly, which allows that lube to kind of get down to where it needs to go. Okay, so I've lubed every link, I've rotated the chain, I've flexed it sideways. That lube should now be down where I want it to be. The last step, the step that most people forget to do, it's the most important step, is to remove all of that excess lube that is sitting on the outside of the chain where you don't really want it or need it. So I just take a rag and I just run it through run the chain through this rag, and I soak up all of the excess lube. I don't want any lube on those outer plates or sitting on the outside of the chain where it can pick up dust or sand or any kind of grit. It becomes black and nasty. But wipe off all the excess lube. Okay, now if I rub now this chain is so clean because it never gets used that it's never going to show what I want to show. So here I'm going to show you two demonstrations of what a chain should look like and shouldn't look like. There's one, there's two. Okay. If you can rub your finger on your chain and you get two lines like that, you can see those two lines, that's an indication that there is lubrication on your chain. It's only where it needs to be. Okay. If you rub your finger on a chain and it's black and nasty like that much lube, that chain needs to be cleaned and re-lubricated properly. But you should be able to just run your finger on your chain and see the presence of lubrication, not nastiness. And you shouldn't grab your chain and rub your fingers on it and get nasty like that. That's That's too much lube and it's nasty. Clean that chain and it'll run better. It won't pick up debris. It won't get all over you. So it'll make your life better. So yeah, that's how you lube a chain. Let's talk about chain lube real quick, because I always get this question. People ask about dry lube or wet lube. So here's two bottles of lube. There's a dry lube with like Teflon, and there's the wet lube. Wet lube, I mean, let's just call it like motor oil. It's thinner. It's specifically formulated for bicycle chains, not, you know, the combustion engine, but it's oil, right? It's liquid. Dry lube, you can see that it's separated. The white stuff kind of floating down here on the bottom is the Teflon little bits, and the clearer stuff is that kind of more liquid vehicle that just carries the Teflon, right? So if you're going to use dry lube, you've got to make sure to shake this up to get all that stuff distributed and floating correctly. Now it's all one color. Dry lube is for the person who's going to ride their bicycle in perfect weather, never going to ride in the rain, never going to get it super muddy or nasty, you know, just fair weather kind of riding, perfect, ideal riding weather. Dry lube all day. That's perfect. It's going to be cleaner on your drivetrain. It's going to do the job. But if you're ever going to get ride in the rain, or it's going to get wet or muddy, then that dry lube is going to wash off when it encounters water. If you're going to ride in any conditions, you don't care. You might leave your bike outside, whatever. Use a wet lube to make sure that chain has plenty of lubrication. It'll resist water. It'll just last longer. You need to know what you put on your chain. So if you used a wet lube and then you go over to your friend's house and you need to add lube to your chain, don't grab their dry lube and add it to your chain. You need to stick with whatever you decided. It's kind of like a make up your mind and stick with it. If you want to change kind of the type of lube, you need to completely strip your chain and clean it, and then add the lube on top of that. So just be aware of that. You can't mix them together. So that's lube discussion, how to lube a chain. Cleaning a chain, you can clean your chain with any kind of a mild degreaser, or heck, just mild like dish soap, like Dawn dish soap. That'll clean off the surface of the chain. If you need to strip a chain down to nothing, then that's a little more of a process. But cleaning a bicycle, I just use a spray bottle with Dawn dish soap, honestly. And I spray it on my bike and I wipe it down with a rag, and I'll have a rag for my chain. And that really kind of gets everything done that I need to get done. Okay, so that's chains. Let's talk about derailleurs real quick. I want you to understand derailleurs, what we're looking at, what you see on a derailleur and what they mean. Here is an example of a road style rear derailleur. Okay, you have this kind of knuckle where it attaches. You have a cage that has two jockey wheels in it. This one's missing a jockey wheel, but just pretend there's one down here. You have a jockey wheel right here, up here, and you'll have one down here. This derailleur has got a little parallelogram that it springs down like this, and then it springs in and outboard on the bicycle at the same time. So it does a lot of moving. Couple things for you to look for here on a rear derailleur. On the back side, on every rear derailleur, every 99.9% of them, you'll have these little Phillips head screws sitting on the back. These are officially called limit screws. They are adjusted at the time this derailleur is installed on the bicycle. They determine how far the derailleur can shift outboard and how far it can shift inboard towards the spokes. That's all these do. These are not shifting adjustment screws. So I like to tell everyone in these classes, refer to these as off limit screws. Do not grab a Phillips screwdriver and start twisting these limit screws. They will not do what you think they're going to do. You will basically end up screwing up your bike. If you adjust the low limit screw, which is for your low gears, you may allow this derailleur to shift into the spokes. You'll drop your chain into your spokes and shred your rear wheel. That's not good. If you adjust your high limit screw, which is for your high gears, you may allow the derailleur to shift off of the smallest little cog into your frame, and you'll wedge your chain between your frame and your cassette. Also, bad deal. So do not mess with the limit screws. Any shifting adjustments to be made are made with the barrel adjuster. This little black thing right here has this silver barrel inside of it. As I spin this, get my fingers out of the way, let me get it to it. As I spin this, you'll see that barrel disappears. It's now gone. Or if I spin it in, I'll make that barrel stick out. That's how you do barrel shifting adjustments, is by turning the barrel adjuster. Okay, I have a demonstration to show you how to do that, but I wanted to show you close up what the barrel adjuster looks like and what on a rear derailleur actually does anything for you. Okay, so that's a rear derailleur. Here's another style rear derailleur. It's an older style. It bolts on with your bolt-on axle instead of having a derailleur hanger that it hangs from. It has the 2 jockey wheels, one here, one here. It's a longer arm cage, so it's for a bigger cassette. But it has the same thing. 2 limit screws. They're clearly marked as H and L. So you have your high limit screw and your low limit screw, and you have a barrel adjuster. Barrel adjuster is gray instead of black, but it does the same thing. So this is a rear derailleur. Okay, let's talk about a front derailleur. Front derailleurs have some of the same stuff. Here is a road style front derailleur. It's what they call a braze on. It mounts to a mount that hangs off of your frame. That's how it attaches with this. I'm sorry, there should be a bolt right here that attaches to the frame. Here is what this is a mountain style rear derailleur, because it has the cage just looks different. This is a much bigger cage than this one. This is a clamp on. It has a clamp built into it. That's how it attaches to the bike. This clamp goes around your seat tube and you clamp that derailleur on. But other than that, they're basically the same. At the top, you're going to see 2 limit screws. Same thing, high and low limit screws. Do not mess with them. Leave them alone unless you know exactly what you're doing. Okay, and then you'll have a pinch bolt for your cable. And this one has it. Sorry about for that glare. Pinch bolt for the cable. Those are front derailleurs. There's no barrel adjuster on a front derailleur. If you need to do any shifting adjustments for the front derailleur, it's done either an inline barrel adjuster in your housing, or it's up at the shifter if you have a mountain bike style shifter. Okay, let's talk about how to make barrel adjustments, because we're typically dealing with rear derailleur shifting issues. Let me position this here, swing this around so that you can see what's happening. I hope I've got this lined up so you can see this. Okay, all right. So shifting adjustments. If you are riding your bicycle and you're shifting, and every time you click the gear, it just seems like that chain just doesn't want to shift like you want it to, or it gets hung up, or it makes a bunch of noise. Let's see if I can make this do this. I'm just going to make this thing make a bunch of noise. I hope you can hear that. There's a chain just kind of skipping along the gears. It's just not happy. If your bike is making that kind of noise, you need to make a derailleur adjustment. If I try to shift, it doesn't go away, or I shifted and it actually didn't shift, like it's stuck. So here's how you attack this. You need to get behind the bicycle. Sorry, obscuring the camera. You need to get behind the bicycle. You need to look straight at the chain. The chain should go straight down from the cog that it's on the cassette, straight down onto the jockey wheels. Straight onto this jockey wheel, straight onto this jockey wheel. If you get behind the bicycle and you look and you see that the chain kind of veers off to a side, it doesn't go straight down. If you see that the chain is hugging one of the cogs next to it, either the smaller cog next to it or hugging one of the bigger cogs next to the one it's on, then that chain is not centered, and you need to make a barrel adjustment. So the reason I tell you to look behind and look at the bicycle, if you can see this chain is closer to the big cog here and further away from the small cog here. If you can see that, I don't know what the resolution is on the screen, but trust me, that's what's going on. It should be perfectly centered between the cogs adjacent. So you need to turn the barrel adjuster the way the derailleur needs to move in order to center that chain. So if the chain is too close to the bigger cog inboard, I want to turn this barrel adjuster out. I'm going to turn it out to move the derailleur so that it's centered. I'll pedal it, I'll look at it, and one more quarter turn. Okay, and then you can shift and see if it shifts as you think it should. Does it make any noise? Does it shift the same speed up the cassette as it does down the cassette? If it's a little sluggish going one way or the other, then you need to adjust it more. But you should shift up and down at the same speed, same response time. Okay, so that's one display of this. I'm going to move my camera to my other tool here and see if I can show you another close-up of how this works. So please bear with me for just 1 second. Move this camera, point this down. All right, switch camera. Hold on, don't get sick here. Okay. Oof. How about that? There we go. Okay, here's a little tool I have. I'm trying to get right up on top of this so you can see. There we go. I'm trying to not obscure the light. Okay, so this is to show you that this jockey wheel should be directly underneath one of the cogs. They should line up perfectly. Every time you shift, that jockey wheel should be directly underneath a cog. Okay, if you turn the barrel adjuster, I'm going to turn it in, and you will see that that jockey wheel will move and no longer be centered directly underneath that cog. If I turn it out, it'll move towards the outside of the bicycle. Can you guys see what is happening? Can you see that in this demonstration?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay, good. That's what a barrel adjuster does, and that's how you have to think about how to turn a barrel adjuster. Turn it the direction you want the derailleur to move so that that jockey wheel lines up perfectly underneath that cog that it should be on. So that's it. That's barrel adjuster. You have shifting problems, look at your drivetrain, assess where it's off, and turn the barrel, and you'll fix
Question.
most of your problems. Yes, sir.
What happens if it lines up perfectly with the inner wheels, but it doesn't line up with the outer cogs?
It should line up. If you have I'm just going to throw some numbers out. Let's say you have a 10-speed bicycle. You have a 10-speed shifter. You have a 10-speed cassette. Every click of that shifter should move that derailleur the exact distance of the spacing on the cassette. So it should line up with the cogs at every position. And I've seen this happen, I'm not saying that's what you're having problems with, but if you have a 9-speed shifter and a 10-speed cassette, it will line up with the top and the bottom. It will not line up with the cogs in the middle. So that's a problem I've seen people have. But it should line up. If it lines up with the upper cogs, it should line up with the lower cogs. Does it just not, like, it won't get to the smallest cog? Is that the problem?
No, I just saw when you shifted gears, it lined up perfectly with the larger, but shift gears lower. It didn't seem like it was shifting.
This is a perspective of the camera.
Okay.
yeah, it does line up. I think it's the camera perspective that throws it off on one side or the other. But yeah, on your setup, on your bike, if you can get it dialed in, it should hit every cog in the range. But that's the only way I've found to be able to demonstrate to people what happens with a barrel adjuster. And this little tool allows people just to play around with this without fear of screwing anything up. They can just twist it, see it work. Oh, I understand which direction to twist it, and that's it. It's a broken derailleur on a yeah. Anyway, that is derailleur adjustments. Does that make now front derailleur again? You have to have a barrel adjuster on the front derailleur, and I'm not going to get in that gets kind of tricky to demonstrate here, but rear derailleur is where most people have the problems. Over time, as you ride your bicycle, your cables will stretch a little bit and your shifting performance will degrade, and you will have to make a slight barrel adjustment every once in a while. Okay, I'm going to come here. Laura, let's talk about shifting 101. You have some slides that demonstrate how to use your bicycle gears. Oh, Laura's gone. Okay, Laura's not here. Let's move on then. Apologize.
Before you move on from that,
yes.
Mark, we had a question come in on how to adjust shifters and gears.
Okay, what you got?
That's it. How do you adjust shifters and gears?
Okay, well, that's what I just showed with the barrel adjuster. If you need to adjust your gears, it's all done at the barrel adjuster. There's no other place to make any adjustments. The limit screws just prevent the derailleur from shifting all the way to the outside or all the way to the inside, is all the barrel the limit screws do. So let me see if I can. I have my stuff right here. Okay, this is a mountain bike style flat bar shifter, and it has a barrel adjuster on it. So if you have a flat bar bicycle with these type of shifters, you can make shifting adjustments right here at the cockpit, and it works the same way. You still got to know which direction to spin this, but it works the same way as a rear derailleur barrel adjuster. The beauty of mountain bike style flat bar shifters is that the front shifter will have a barrel adjuster, and that's where you can make adjustments to your front derailleur position, is with the barrel adjuster. On a road bicycle with an integrated road style lever, they don't have barrel adjusters built into them. So if you have a flat bar, you can adjust on the fly while you're riding. If you have a road bicycle, it all needs to be done at the derailleur, any kind of shifting adjustment. Laura, now that you're back, let's talk about, can you bring up those slides on shifting 101? There we go. Okay. Will you go to the slide 2 down, slide number 7? Okay. This is a slide that I want, and it's exaggerated, but it's exaggerated for a reason. This is something I want to explain to everybody about how not to use your bicycle gears. These two examples are what we call cross chaining. Your bicycle chain works best when it is as straight as possible. In both of these examples, you will see that the chain has to make a right or a left turn after it comes off of the front chain rings to go to the rear cassette. And your chain and your drivetrain will not be happy with this scenario. It does not like to bend sideways. So when you're riding, I want you to think about this and try to never put yourself in a position where you have to cross chain. This example shows a triple chain ring, which is 3 chain rings up front and an 8-speed in the rear. So when you cross chain like this, you're flexing your chain sideways, your chain is rubbing against your front derailleur cage. It's not really grabbing all the teeth on the cassette properly. So let's try to avoid that. Let's go to 2 up, number 5, Laura. Okay. If you are going to be riding in some hilly areas and you know you're going to be climbing a hill for a while, you should just put it in. If you have a triple, if you don't have a triple and you have a double chain ring, then just think about your small chain ring. Put it in that small chain ring, and then you can use most of the low gears in the cassette, and your chain line will be pretty straight. Your chain will be happy. It'll do what you need it to do, and it'll do it efficiently. If you are go 2 down, number 8, I see it. Yeah, I don't know why those are out of order. If you're just riding around, no significant hills, you're not really looking to go fast, and there's no tailwind or no descents, you can accomplish most of what you want to do just by keeping it in your middle chain ring and using the majority of the cogs in the cassette. It'll be fairly straight chain line. It'll be happy. It'll shift as you need it to. No issues really. So this is kind of like the sweet spot. Second chain ring, most of the gears in the back. But if you're wanting to go fast or you're wanting to climb a hill, then put it in the chain ring that you're going to use, will need, and don't cross chain. So go up to number 6. I really don't know why those are out of order. If you want to go fast, go downhill, get a tailwind, whatever you want to use your big chain ring, then you really only want to use those smaller cogs in the back. Keep that straight chain line. But that's my soapbox preaching of don't cross chain. I see it way too often. When you cross chain, you are flexing that chain sideways, and you are basically you're going to wear out your chain faster because your chain's not meant to do that. It'll make a bunch of noise. You'll complain about it not shifting properly. And people run in the big chain ring, and then they try to climb a hill, and they realize they can't get all the way up the hill in the big chain ring. They try to shift the front derailleur while they're under load, and then everything goes to heck and bad things happen. So I suggest, if you know you're going to be climbing a hill, just put it in the smaller chain ring and use the gears that you've been carrying around. Don't put your bike in a position to fail you. Okay, that's what I've got for shifting 101. Okay, that's done. I'm done with my drivetrain or chain spiel. Let's move on to my last little PSA I'd like to give to people that I've seen happen way too many times. We'll talk about quick releases. If you have a bicycle that has quick release axles, you're familiar with what this looks like. This is a quick release. Actually, it should be over here. The handle should always be on the non-drive side. Quick release has your handle side, and it has your end cap here that threads on and off. And then it has these 2 little springs that live in the middle. And these springs are shaped like cones. There's your skinny kind of end, and then your fat end there. The fat end always fits inside of the end cap, and the skinny end meets up against the edge of the axle. Okay, the quick release, this is not the axle, this is just a skewer. The axle is what actually sits in the fork or the dropout. These, if you put these springs on backwards, they will throw off the alignment of your wheel when you put it back in your bicycle, and your wheel will sit cockeyed, and then it'll rub against the brakes, and it'll just drive you insane. So if you're ever putting your springs on, if your quick release falls apart, please make sure that the skinny end of the springs point in. Okay, always point in. If you have some catastrophe and you lose one of these springs out there on the road because you had to change a flat, these are not important. They are just a convenience feature. You do not need them to function your bicycle. So if you lose one, it's fine, move on. But make sure they're on in their correct orientation. I've seen people come in to a bike shop and they're just having a heck of a time that their wheel is rubbing against their brake, and they just don't understand because it was perfect yesterday. And through discussion with them, you find out, well, yeah, I took my wheel off the bicycle to stick it in my car, and they unscrewed the whole thing. And when you look at their quick release, they've got their spring backwards, and that's putting the axle in the bike wrong. So just know what that is. Okay, that really is my entire presentation. So now I will open it up to any specific questions anybody has, that, or if they didn't feel like I covered something clearly and they want me to approach it differently, I can do that. No?
Mark, thank you. It was really very informative.
You're welcome.
It was, I learned a lot, and I'm old.
We can always learn stuff. It's a trick, Bob. We used to do these in person. It was a whole lot easier when I could have people touch and feel this stuff. And I'm struggling every time we do this to try to show and clearly display what I'm trying to get the point across. So I appreciate your feedback, that you could comprehend what I was trying to describe.
I've got two questions. Number
Yes,
one,
sir.
if I could buy a book on how to fix bikes, could you give me an author or a title?
Hold that thought. There's a couple books out there. I have them here. There's the Big Blue Book of Bicycle Repair from Park Tool. Okay, it's a good reference. It'll give you can at least like look in there and get an idea of some things. You know, YouTube is also a great, absolutely great tool. That I would never be afraid to look at YouTube. I mean, there's specific stuff on your exact component that you're having to do work with. But the Park Tool Big Blue Book of Bicycle Repair is great. Leonard Zinn, Z-I-N-N, he puts out some stuff also. He's a great reference too. But yeah, I would start there if you like to have a book as a reference. I keep it in my work stand. I will pull it out occasionally. What's your second question?
Okay, second question is, I got a little air compressor that I fill the tires up with. Is
Yes.
there any do's or don'ts or be careful with?
Okay, so if you have an air compressor, does it have a regulator?
Yes.
Okay, so I have an air compressor in my house. We have one here at the shop that we just have it set where I cannot put any more than 45 PSI in any of the tires in our shop here at Bike Walk. At my home shop, my air compressor, I adjust that regulator depending on what I'm doing. If I'm doing, mechanic stuff, like not bicycle stuff, I want higher pressure, but if I'm working on bikes, I'll adjust that regulator so that it'll never go any higher than what that tire can handle. If you don't want to fiddle with the regulator, that's fine too. You can just hit it on the tire just for short bursts and just kind of check it, squeeze it. The rule of thumb we always tell people when they check their tires is the tire should feel firm like a basketball, and you should be able to just kind of squeeze your tire and know if you're there. So I guess that would be my caution to you. If you're using a compressor, just don't hold the head on the tube and just let it go, because it'll eventually explode, and that's pretty violent. I don't think you're going to do that, but for anyone else out there who uses a compressor, if you go to the gas station and use their compressor, it is set to go higher than your tire will handle, and it will blow your tire off. Yeah, compressors, just hit them, check them, put a little more air in, check it again. Be very careful with those.
Good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Really appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Anything else? Any other questions?
No, but thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Any other questions? I guess you can hit us up at BikeWalkKC.org. We're available. want everybody to walk away with this, fully understanding everything they want. So, yeah, and we'll be back next month or 2 months?
To be determined.
Okay, to be determined. Okay. This is honestly, and I don't know if I should share this, but a little bit behind the curtain, this is our first run with the Kansas City Public Library. So, yeah, I'm excited for the future.
Thank you very much, Mark and Laura. We are very appreciative of getting this content out to our Kansas City Public Library patrons. So have a great afternoon, everyone. Be well, and we will catch you next time.